Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. The Serenity Prayer is attributed to Reinhold Niebuhr. It emerged in the late 1930s in the face of a rapidly changing society. As Brenna said, many of us are familiar with the Serenity Prayer because it was adopted by Alcoholics Anonymous and other 12-step programs. This simple prayer is based on a profound principle. It's the opening to deeper inner reflection and peace. I find myself returning to the Serenity Prayer in moments when I need centering. This is a prayer written by a Christian theologian, and if using God isn't prayerful for you, it could begin with God of our many understandings, Spirit of life, or my complicated human mind. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. It's like 3 instructions to finding serenity. The first, accept the things I cannot change. There are many things that we cannot change, many more than we'd like to admit. In the late 1930s, not so different from today, society faced economic hardships, technological advances, political tension, changing roles for members of society, including immigrants and women and people of color. And now, more than ever, we are affected by the world news and the world events. We read constantly, we listen all day long, we worry, we lose sleep, and those big issues are far beyond our control. Can we accept that we cannot change them? Can we hold them more lightly? There are plenty of things closer to home that I cannot change, that I worry about. I worry about my niece, who's a freshman in high school, and the fact that my parents are aging. I get so annoyed when people don't use their turn signal. So easy. My family, we just moved from California in August, where wildfire smoke has become part of life. I can't control any of that, and it is hard to accept. How about you? What are you worried about or annoyed by? What are things in your life that you are holding on to? And I invite you just to a moment of silence to hold that in your mind. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. Because there are things that we can change. It does take courage to acknowledge them, and sometimes it takes a lot of work to actually change them. I cannot change my niece's high school experience. I cannot stop my parents from aging, but I can call them all more often. I can help them find support systems. There are lots of ways that we can change, little things. We can hold back that snarky comment or just turn on the turn signal. There are other changes that are not so easy. Changes we should make because they are unhealthy for ourselves or for others, like our thoughts, our actions, or our situations. It takes courage sometimes to be kind to people we don't know or understand. And we can practice gratefulness, honesty, kindness, and forgiveness. It takes bravery to leave our homes when we're no longer safe there, and we can find a safe place to live. And it takes so much courage and humility to look inward to the places where we are not our best selves, the places in need of change. I have an extroverted tendency to fill in quiet time or to quickly lead in the conversation, and you might have already learned that about me. These tendencies can shut people out, turn them away. This was not easy to admit to myself, but it was something, and especially as I entered into the ministry, something that I knew I needed to change inside. Being extroverted, being a leader, that was part of who I understood myself to be. I love jumping in the conversation, suggesting the right way of doing something, and then I love accepting the nomination to be in charge. And it was preventing other people from participating fully. So even as I started to acknowledge that my style was a certain way, I could feel a shift. I was intentional about changing. It was exhausting. I was constantly biting my tongue, stepping back, worrying if I was being authentic or not, figuring out how much I should keep quiet and when. And looking in my past and at my patterns and understanding where those tendencies came from and how they've played out in my life, I learned a lot. And it didn't take long before I could feel in myself a more natural way of slowing down, of giving space. Of course, at first I shifted maybe too far the other way, and it didn't feel right. So I'm always working on balance still today. I know those changes have made my friendships and my relationships and my daily interactions more healthy, both for me and the people I am with. I have witnessed incredibly courageous changes from people, from seemingly small changes in attitudes to major lifestyle changes. One story from my summer serving as a hospital chaplain sticks with me about this. I visited regularly with a man while he was going through chemotherapy appointments, and he loved to talk about his family and his garden, and never about his illness. He often told me stories about his great-granddaughter and how every time he would leave for the hospital, she would try to give him her stuffed animal. There was a little lion named Snuggler. And he laughed as he told me the way he would, take it and then hide it or avoid taking it from this little girl. And over the weeks, it became kind of a joke. I'd ask him about Snuggler, and he'd give me this dutiful roll of the eyes, like many men his age would. And then he was admitted to the hospital a few nights. And I happened to be on duty, and it was a scary wake-up call about the seriousness of his illness. We talked one night again about his family and his garden, and finally the conversation shifted to him wondering about what would be left of his family and his garden after he died. We talked about things that he could do now to take care of them in whatever time he had left. What little things might he do or say or plan that will help them? There were things he could change. About 2 weeks later, he returned to his chemo treatments, and you know what? He brought Snuggler, the stuffed lion, with him. I smiled as I introduced myself to the lion on his lap, and instead of rolling his eyes, he said, "It means a lot to her." Of course, it meant a lot to him. And he had the courage to look at himself and think about his legacy and the people around him. Changing the things we can takes courage and humility. So I invite you again into just a moment of silence, holding in your mind something that you could change, something you could change in your life. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. That final part, gaining the wisdom to know the difference between the things we can and cannot change. We often say we learn with experience, with age, with mistakes, and it's all true. We do learn about ourselves and the world and other people, but we do not automatically become wise. Wisdom suggests we might do something differently in the future. That, for example, we have learned from our mistakes and will not repeat them. That is the kind of wisdom we hope for, the kind of wisdom that helps us find serenity. Wisdom is inside each of us. It is found when we try to understand our motivations and our reactions. It's found in many ways. Many people engage in spiritual practices like journaling, where you write deeply and honestly about thoughts and anxieties. Some people who journal tell me about the process of going back to old journals and seeing the stories that repeat and the stories that change. Some people find moments like this, moments of reflection in worship or in small group ministry or meditation, yoga, so many ways that we give ourselves the space, the time, the quiet to reflect. You might find this in individual therapy or support groups or close friendships or other safe places where you can be. I hope that you have something like that, and if you don't, I hope you'll consider giving yourself just a moment, and then tomorrow a few more moments, and the next day a few more. Give yourself the space you need. When we find ourselves anxious or upset about something in our lives, we can use that serenity prayer. We can pause for a breath. We can let go of what we cannot change. And another breath in, we can breathe in the courage to change what we can. That's where we find the wisdom, on the other side of the confusion and unknowns. We can ask ourselves tough questions like, what am I responsible for? What am I doing, and what is the limit? And at the end of the day, we hold on to all that we can change is inside ourselves, if we can listen and hear it. So let's pause one more time. What might help you gain the wisdom of knowing the difference between what you can and cannot change? What do you need to make space for to gain that wisdom? Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Having the courage to change what we can will impact our lives and the lives around us in immeasurable ways. And gaining the wisdom to know the difference will empower each of us to live with more intention and more peace. May we all find serenity. Amen. Will you join me in song with hymn number 298, Wake Now My Senses? Please rise in body or spirit. We're going to sing the first 3 verses.